New Rockstars, I'm Jessica Clemons.
And I'm Erik Voss.
I hate you so much. I love you at the same time. This is a breakdown of Wicked Part 1, the 2024 Jon Chu adaptation, the Broadway hit starring Cynthia, Erivo, and Ariana Grande.
I love this movie so much. Jessica and I both have like long histories with Wicked and The Wizard of Oz and the Wicked Life and Times book and The Wiz and just every version of this. And we both just like loved this movie, loved looking at it again and again, and just we saw so much in it that we wanted to share with you. And before we get into all the cool stuff that we found in this movie, just a reminder that the best way to support what we do here at New Rockstars is to grab some merch from our merch store, nerdriot.shop. And if you're new at New Rockstars, yes, we do cover a lot of like Marvel and Star Wars stuff, but we also just cover any awesome big movie that you guys love, like Wicked. So we hope that you subscribe and just give us a chance, because I think you'll like what you find here. Also, even though we're sure like 95% of you who watch this movie have seen the stage show at least once, we are going to save spoilers for part 2 of the movie from Act 2 of the stage show, and part 2 of the movie is coming next year. We're going to save all the spoilers for the end of this video in a section we are calling Spoilers Seriously Support Live Theater.
Yes, please.
All right, let's get into it. The opening black and white Universal Studios logo resembles the 1936 era bumper, which would have been used when Victor Fleming's Wizard of Oz came out in 1939, though that film was produced by MGM.
Yes, the movie begins with what should be the end of the musical. We see the feathers of the flying monkeys, a puddle of water, bits of burnt flakes, and smoke rising in the air.
And this is a very important opening image that the second film will come back to, but here we hear a voice asking Galinda if the Wicked Witch is really dead, and Galinda's voice, of course, Ariana Grande, reports, "Because there has been so much rumor and speculation, let me tell you the whole story. According to the Time Dragon clock, the melting occurred on the 13th hour." So the Time Dragon is what opens the Broadway show. It's a giant mechanical dragon perched above the proscenium, and the entire set is shaped like a clock face. And it's a reference to Gregory Maguire's Wicked novel, in which the Clock of the Time Dragon is a traveling puppet show, where at the top of it, the clock hand is held perpetually 1 minute before midnight, even though there are 13 hours on it. And all the clocks in this movie have 13 hours on it. That's how they keep their time. And here, the sharp point tip of Elphaba's hat points to 1 minute just before midnight, framed in the circle of this window. Also, this image of the huge hat filling the frame is a reference to the original staging of the opening number of Wicked, when the cast would rotate a giant version of Elphaba's hat on stage and then collapse it when they're like, "Good news." This would have been the staging actually when Jon Chu saw the show in San Francisco during previews. But a few years into the run, the staging was changed to lose the giant hat. I know I saw the giant hat when I saw the show in July 2005.
Then we follow the flying monkey soaring out the window, down the rocky walls and cliffside to a waterfall where the mist creates a rainbow. Like a callback to the 1939 Wizard of Oz, somewhere over that rainbow, the camera takes us to the lion, Scarecrow, Toto, Dorothy with Elphaba's broom, and the Tin Man. They're walking the yellow brick road to Emerald City.
Now, in The Wizard of Oz, we never see this walk back from the Wicked Witch's castle to the Emerald City, and the castle is actually named Cameo in the Wicked novel. It's also known as Fiyero's family stronghold. But it is worth noting that the Scarecrow joins Dorothy and the rest here in this shot, and we will see how there will be more to the story of these characters in the second film, but logically, whatever happens there must take place after what we see here, the gang walking back to the Emerald City to deliver the broom to the wizard. We should also note that we see someone else riding Fiyero's horse toward the yellow brick road, away from the castle, separate from the rest of the group. And if you've seen the stage show, you know who that someone else must be.
The camera then takes us to the children running back to Munchkinland to tell them all the good news. The team did a really great job of interviews and press junkets for this movie, and through that we learned that the crew planted all these 9 million tulips that fit the same color pattern as L. Frank Baum's Map of Oz. Nathan Crowley, the production designer, who not surprisingly also worked on The Greatest Showman and Wonka, told Architectural Digest the heads of the flowers were later harvested and adapted as living roofs for the Munchkins homes, and you can see that throughout the movie.
Very cool. Now, Stephen Schwartz, the legend who composed the music and lyrics of the 2004 musical, also told us to listen closely to this specific part for some musical Easter eggs.
Right at the very top of the movie, I'll just tell people, you have to listen quick because it goes by quickly, but when the kids run through the tulip field at the very beginning to announce the death of the witch, listen.
And we tried, Stephen. We are hearing all kinds of things here. It kind of sounds like it's a mix of Harold Arlen and Herbert Stothart's music that played over the opening shot of Dorothy running away with Toto. Plus maybe some horns playing a bit of ding dong the witch is dead. But we also just gonna hear leitmotifs to let us be glad, let us be joyful, which is also I see a nose, I see a curl. It's all kind of the same thing. Actually, Stephen Schwartz's musical ref might have just been the fact that unlimited is really the first few notes of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Check out this clip.
And finally, there was the unlimited motif, the first 7 notes of which
are the melody of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. If we do it in a different rhythm, it's...
So really, as we go through the rainbow formed by the waterfall, hearing a bit of Unlimited in there is just kind of his way of showing that this is all Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So in summary, we hear Somewhere Over the Rainbow and Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and Mrs. Gulch's theme. Da, 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 da. Now, while the stage show opens with just general Ozians, this film goes right to the Munchkinland town square with the iconic spiral end of the Yellow Brick Road where Dorothy Gale began her journey.
Yes, and this is where we see different posters and warnings for the witch. Munchkinland is great, and Jon Chu mentioned in an interview how he wanted Munchkinland to be more of a culture than a look. They're very agricultural, hence all the tulips, they're all tulip croppers. That's when Galinda appears. Grammy award-winning singer and songwriter Ariana Grande plays her, and she does a great job. She does a great job. I love her so much. She appears in a beautiful pink bubble. In the original Wizard of Oz, Glinda's bubble was a glass ball shot with these crazy 1930s photographic techniques to make it look the way it did. The Wicked stage musical used a very steampunk bubble-shaped machine, different from the movie, of course, but this movie actually kind of molds the two bubbles. As you see, Galinda's on a mechanical carriage. She steps on a button to create the bubble, and she's almost like the Pope.
And what's cool about the stage show version, it's like the pendulum of the time dragon clock.
Though similar to the older movie, they also still use Ari in front of a blue screen to recreate the bubble because that's clearly not, practical. She's not actually floating in a bubble.
What? And I appreciate the little wave that Galinda does in between her lyrics here, which is something most of the stage Galinda, starting with the great Kristen Chenoweth, have done over the years upon their entrances to just really mug up Galinda's love of working a crowd, because it's all she has now.
That's all she has now.
Also, if you look closely, among these cheering Munchkinlanders, one of them is Stephanie J. Block, who played the original Nessa Rose on Broadway, and she stayed with several different generations of the cast.
But she also has this beautiful dress, and it's stunning. InStyle spoke with Wicked costume designer Paul Tazwell, who broke down all these dresses for the movie. Paul Tazwell also designed the costumes for The Wiz Live in 2016, and he met Jon Chu through Lin-Manuel Miranda for In the Heights. As you'll see throughout the movie, a ton of homages and inspirations are taken from the original 1939 movie, but one of the major ones is in Galinda's looks. We first meet Billy Burke in the original movie. She appears out of her bubble. The bubble is now seen and interpreted as the reoccurring pattern for all of Ariana's designs. Her tiara is made of bubbles stacked on top of each other, and her dress is a reinterpretation of the Fibonacci spiral shape with bubbles drawn at the bottom because she's always bubbly. They get into No One Mourns the Wicked. While the stage show touches on Elphaba's conception and birth, this sequence goes more into her early childhood, which sets up the most beautiful moment in Defying Gravity later.
And a bit of background on this whole mythology, L. Frank Baum published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900, which then led to a series of sequel novels, but then that original novel was adapted into a Broadway musical in 1902. Then the MGM, Victor Fleming, Judy Garland, The Wizard of Oz in 1939. Then we had The Wiz, which is awesome in its own right. Then the 1985 Walter Murch for Zavalk Return to Oz that we don't talk about. Then Gregory Maguire's 1995 book, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, which reframed the whole story from the Wicked Witch of the West's perspective as a sympathetic anti-hero, and it gets into some very detailed prose and 90s feminist themes that blew the mind of this teenage kid who thought he was gonna be opening up something else, but I loved it. And this book is what Stephen Schwartz and Winnie Holtzman adapted into the Broadway blockbuster in 2004, which Jon Chu has now adapted into this two-part film event. It's just crazy that in a way we kind of went book to stage musical to movie, and then again we've gone book to stage musical to movie. Gregory Maguire, by the way, came up with the name of Elphaba using the name of the author, L. Frank Baum, Elphaba. Really at the center of every adaptation of the story has been a coded allegory for things like superficiality and the power of myths that we tell each other and good old-fashioned American bullshit. And I think its recognition of phonyism is why The Wizard of Oz and every version of it has been really the most important American legend.
I agree wholeheartedly. Andy Nyman plays Elphaba's father, the governor of Munchkinland, Governor Throp, and her mother, Milena Throp, is played by Courtney Mae Briggs, who was a Broadway performer from In the Heights in Hamilton. We see him bid farewell to his wife, who a new suitor immediately welcomes. The unnamed traveling salesman clearly has an affair with Elphaba's mother, and he whisks her away with his green elixir.
And there's a fun nod to the stage show choreography where Milena follows the stranger down and then then pops right back up screaming in labor pain, which is exactly how this abrupt transition occurs on stage, and it's awesome. The stranger, we should note, lowers in a conspicuously placed trapdoor in the stage version, which becomes important to this set later.
In this delivery room, we have 3 human nurses, a wolf and a bear. Sharon D. Clark is the voice of the midwife bear. It's Dulcie Bear. In the stage play, she was delivered by just like a regular goat person.
Yep, and I love how they had the green light on that baby.
They did. They held it up like Simba, and it was like, it was very much more dramatic in the stage play. Beneath the mother's bed, though, we glimpse the beautiful silver slippers. These silver slippers will be passed to Nessa Rose soon, if you've seen the movie, which I know you guys have because you're watching this. Director Jon mentioned a tiny detail on the crystal shoes. It's hard to notice because the designs are just so captivating, but the heels are shaped like tornadoes, because Dorothy showed up on one of them. She showed up on one of those, I guess. As soon as the baby is delivered, everyone panics because of her green baby skin. The governor yells to remove her at once, and her powers are revealed in the height of the panic, which wasn't done in the musical. I love the addition because it showcases her powers a little more, showing that they've been there since day one.
Now, an interesting lyric change here. Normally, Elphaba's parents say, "It's atrocious, it's obscene," but now the mother says it's uncanny, while the father still says it's obscene. And I think it's just to take things a bit easier on this mom the moment she's given birth, while the dad is still as much of an asshole. But I think we will see in Defying Gravity how important this is, because it shows how throughout Elphaba's life, from the moment she was born, she has always levitated everything around her, which from her perspective has made it feel like she has been sinking, has been falling, has been submerged to a sunken place. And it sets up such a cool reversal of that in Defying Gravity.
We also see that the bear ends up raising Elphaba as her nanny, and as a child, Elphaba reads this pop-up book, The Story of Oz and the Wonderful Wizard. They're actually selling replicas of this book already. It was immediate. Inside it tells the story of Oz and how he came from the sky in a hot air balloon.
And I just love how this kind of sets up the way the Grimmerie folds as like an adult version of this pop-up book, but it ends up being the true legend of Oz that only Elphaba can read. The pop-up book that she reads here is just total propaganda given to the kids of this land. But in a way, this balloon ends up being kind of Chekhov's balloon, as Elphaba and Galinda will later use this exact balloon to try to escape.
Returning to Munchkinland, and I love this scene. Someone asks Glenda, "Were you friends with the witch?" And quickly we get sudden flashbacks to their days at Shiz, and it's just so good. These moments we can't get on stage are great in the film because it adds that sense of urgency, but also so much sadness before we even see their relationship play on screen.
And that's why I think Ariana Grande was just so good in this part, because you really see that she is as much of a complex character as Elphaba will be revealed to be. Specifically with Galinda's lyrics here, "And goodness knows the wicked's lives are lonely, goodness knows the wicked die alone." She's not singing about Elphaba here, she is singing about herself and her own guilt for her part in painting Elphaba as the villain. It's all such a pensive beat for Galinda as she ignites the effigy of her old friend Elphaba, the Elphagy. And in this moment, and in several moments throughout the film, you actually can hear the opening notes of For Good. Da, 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 da. And of course, that's the beautiful duet in Act 2 of the stage show, and it's gonna be in movie 2, that really just sums up Galinda and Elphaba's friendship. And in this opening song, No One Mourns the Wicked, we also hear some lyrics that were in the original 2001 workshop that were removed from the Broadway version, "Ring every bell, wave every banner." Interesting that they put that back in. So Galinda is the one who's lonely, who will die alone. And clearly, Ariana Grande gets the assignment here, going up a harmony higher than the soprano melody note, or the final note of Wicked, and she goes, "Ah!" And she goes way higher than you need to, but it's so on brand for Galinda, because not only is she trying to show off, it is like a desperate cry for attention.
Oh my God, that's so real. Oh, she did such a good job. Good job, Ari, all around. If you see this, I'm obsessed with it. I'm obsessed with it. She begins telling us the story that's all just too familiar to everybody. We first see a school of rainbow fishes, green and pink fishes swimming towards Shiz. Galinda reaches her little fingers in, smiling. The students are arriving to Shiz University by boat, train, everything. And of course, Galinda shows up on her own little boat with too many bags. This is when we also get the Wicked Part 1 title page, which is incredibly great. And I know it's simply just the older font reminiscent of the 1939 film, but it's still so iconic. We then get an overview of Shiz University, which is stunning and also a very practical set. This took 20 weeks to build, which makes complete sense when you see the attention to detail. We get a glimpse, a tiny glimpse, and never see them again in this movie, of Galinda's parents, Adam James as Galinda's father, and Alice Fern as Galinda's mother.
Alice Fern is, like many actors in this cast, a former Elphaba herself. She was in the West End production from 2017 to 2019.
Then out of nowhere comes Bach, played by Ethan Slater.
Yep, and actually the first wide shot we get of Bach, Ethan Slater is leaning stiffly clearly in a very familiar pose. More on that in the spoilers section. Now, Slater is a Broadway sensation in his own right, originating the lead role in the SpongeBob SquarePants musical.
Yes. The choir begins singing Dear Old Shiz and is orchestrated by Keela Settle, who is also playing Miss Coddle. Not from the book or play, but she's labeled as one of the headmistresses of Shiz University Online.
Now, Keela played the bearded lady in The Greatest Showman and made Hugh Jackman cry in that one viral cast rehearsal video so much that he told Jeremy Jordan to sit the down. Keela is actually a friend of mine, and I did a Zoom trivia night with her one time, and she's so nice.
Now you know 2 people from Wicked. Guess who the second one is? Everybody guess in the comments. Then Elphaba steps into the scene and we get this exact sequence from the trailer. She steps out, brushes her stray hair back into her ponytail, and in this scene we see her long green nails and her girl's rocking micro braids. And I don't know who's doing the hair in Oz, but gimme. Cynthia Erivo has made both of these choices for her character. She noted in an interview that they were celebrating her culture, but the long nails also felt like a nod to the world of Oz and her magic, like an extension of her magic drew from her fingertips. After shocking everyone around her, she finally meets Galinda eye to eye, and unfortunately, Elphaba's dad arrives to break up all the commotion. He then scolds Elphaba for her behavior and for causing a scene that she didn't really start. Then he gives his favorite child, Nessa Rose, her mother's silver slippers. This was also when I noticed her striped socks, and if you remember The Wizard of Oz, those striped socks may be a starting staple in her wardrobe choices. We're then taken to the quad, hummingbirds ring the bells, and just how whimsical is this world?
Yeah.
On the wall, you can see a mural like it was carved into the wall with a great and powerful Oz welcoming you. The students all gather and we meet the other faculty. We see Dr. Dillamond, voiced by Peter Dinklage. There's another animal professor here, and how freaking horrible, it's a shoebill stork. If you don't know these animals, their clacking of their beaks sound like a machine gun, but it also eats monkeys. So lock that thing up in a cage.
Did you also catch that, like, the animal professors, like Dr. Dillamond, get, like, less of an applause?
Yeah.
Like, there's so much racism.
100%. That's how shook I am by this moment. It absolutely is true. We're also then introduced to Michelle Yeoh as Madame Morrible, the headmistress.
Now, one of the names Madame Morrible reads out is Gulch, a nod to Mrs. Gulch, the Gale's dog-hating neighbor back in Kansas. Morrible also names the head of biologies as Professor Mombi, which is the name of the Witch of the North, the villain in L. Frank Baum's second book, The Marvelous Land of Oz. More on Woombi later.
Everyone gets their room assignments. Miss Coddle, without asking, takes it upon herself to take Nessa Rose where she needs to go, and as Nessa Rose and Elphaba have already shown all of us, Nessa Rose can care for herself. But this upsets Elphaba, and she screams, "Stop!" And the seats, dorm keys, and books go soaring into the sky, including Nessa Rose. In the stage show, the chair actually just spins through a power wheel in the back in circles, whereas now the chair's tethered and lifted into the sky. It's also practical instead of CGI'd, which is insane to do. Those using mobilities rarely get to do stunts like this, so truly bravo. I'm so happy you guys did it. In the randomly thrown debris, something hits the mural at the Wizard, and when it breaks, it reveals a portrait of different animal faculty members.
Yeah, I saw this, and I was wondering if they're like the original founders of Shiz before the propaganda set in. We see a bear, an owl, a raccoon, and I think a goat. And I wonder if this is like they're doing their own Four Houses of Hogwarts. And if that is the case, you know the raccoon's got to be the Hufflepuffs, right?
100%. You don't give them the different colored robes and act like this isn't Hufflepuff.
One's a bird, yeah.
Yeah, one's a bird. Intrigued by Elphaba, Madame Morrible asks the student body who among them can house her so she can attend Shiz, but more importantly, so she can attend her sorcery class. In a clumsy mix-up like the stage musical, Galinda accidentally volunteers her private suite. Then Morrible escorts Elphaba off-screen and offers to teach her privately. They head down a spiral staircase that leads to a little pond, a little hideaway of some sort. This is where you start noticing the green and pink color patterns, especially in the foliage. Throughout the movie, most plants, if not just tree trunks, are green and pink. This is where the two begin singing The Wizard and I, and this is Michelle Yeoh's first musical.
She does pretty good.
I think she does great. And also, Madame Morrible just has to be commandeering, like reckoning,
it's a
and
lot
she
of
does
speech
a good job.
singing for them.
She sings throughout the entire school, and this set is remarkable. Like, I know I keep talking about the set design, but geez Louise, are you serious? I wasn't expecting it to be this detailed and wholly built for dancing and singing, and according to Cynthia Erivo, microphones are implemented everywhere.
She melts our hearts in this sequence. The part where Elphaba just had a vision, almost like a prophecy. She sees her reflection from, what's that? Water! And what she sees on the wall is a celebration of Munchkins from the opening act. But, you know, the vision doesn't show the wooden effigy or effigy that they are really burning in that moment. But it is still a prophecy. It's just a celebration throughout Oz that truly has all to do with her. Now, John Costa pointed out on our break room review how they used stained glass here when Elphaba sings, "If I did green, if I you." And Cynthia is under a different color of light from the stained glass. That's so cool.
The scene is really beautiful. Exiting through this area of the school takes you to the back side, which overlooks what looks like a wheat field. I assume it's a wheat field. She's running and still singing The Wizard and I.
Yeah, it really feels like a classic I Want moment, like Belle in Beauty and the Beast, right? And lovers of the stage show know how important this bar is. And I'll stand there with the wizard, feeling things I've never felt. Of all the Elphabas to play the part. Jessica Voss is perhaps the best at this part. She hits all the notes right in the middle of them. But Cynthia gets close. She does great too. But really, it's the specific word of things I've never felt, because young Elphaba is so exploding with excitement that she can't even come up with another noun to define this feeling. And Jon Chu gives a little Richard Donner Superman homage as Elphaba gleefully leaps up in the wheat, just as the young Clark Kent does when he's learning to fly in the 1978 film. The tagline of that movie was, "You will believe a man can fly," and really the whole promise of the Wicked stage musical is, "You will believe this witch can fly." Elphaba runs up to the edge of the cliff and belts, and while we would expect to see something like water, remember, all of Oz is actually bordered by the deadly desert, which cuts it off from the rest of the world. But in the distance, we see another little rainbow, as this land is the somewhere over the rainbow, and what we're seeing there is a gateway that leads back to our sepia-toned shithole.
She's back at her dormitory with Galinda, and everything is going wrong. Galinda has taken up every inch of the dorm except for a little bit of space behind her dresses. The room is a perfect circle, and it's made great to move around with a camera. The storage boxes are just great added components to give the girls more room to play. Dressed in Nessa Rose's nightgown, I'm 100% sure this is one of Nessa Rose's outfits, because one, there was no original plan for Elphaba to be there in the first place. B, Nessa's outfits are light, always lighter in colors to Elphaba's dark tone, and have a specific sewing pattern just like this one. Elphaba and Galinda write to their parents that night, and this is where we start getting into what is that feeling, or as some point out as loathing. I'm obsessed with the sequence in which they shot this song. This is my favorite choreography, next to like a very particular scene in Dancing Through Life. It works so well in tandem with the camera, and they just did a fantastic job overall.
Also, I just love this moment in the song.
She's a tartar, we don't mean to show a bias, but Galinda, you're a martyr.
Well, these things I send to try us.
And not only does Ariana crush that note, the light in the window behind her forms a perfect angelic halo. Also, you could say a bubble.
We fly through some great sets here. We get them entering the lunchroom, and the juxtaposition between the two is just so entertaining, so nice. It just complements each other so well. Then they move to a science classroom, fighting for desk, fencing, or a fighting class that we didn't actually even get in the stage show.
But it's like kind of like shows you the fascist order of Oz if they're teaching them how to fight. What are they teaching them to fight for? What war are they going to wage? Yikes.
And it is like sticks, it's like spears, swords. You're getting prepared for that.
Also, the fight choreography between Elphaba and Galinda, where they hit their batons against each other, actually foreshadows a very hilarious sparring session between the characters in Act 2 of the stage show that we must get in the second film. I was a detail-obsessed nerd before I worked at New Rockstars, and so it's easy for me to forget that this is a job. There's a whole company behind every video we put out, and I'll tell you this, knowing every Dr. Doom storyline Marvel should adapt is not the same as knowing how to run a business. To learn that, I had to turn to Masterclass. Masterclass showed me how to use discipline to boost creativity and how to get over writer's block. Having a Masterclass membership unlocks access to hundreds of courses that can help you be a better writer, clearer communicator, and more effective at whatever it is you need to do to get to the next level of your career. For instance, I took a class from R.L. Stine about how to use outlines to overcome writer's block. Having grown up on Goosebumps, that was wild for me, but his advice was so helpful. Now when I'm stuck on part of a complicated video, I move on to the next section and come back. It's been so helpful. Getting a Masterclass membership is like getting yourself a tutor who can help you do pretty much anything. Their classes cover so many different subjects that curious people like me never run out of new things to learn, and they're adding new classes all the time. Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes up to as much as 50% off. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code for 15% off.
This leads to Dr. Dillamond's history class, and this little goat enters the room through a little door attached to a bigger door, and you just gotta love the attention to detail. He tells the class he's one of the last animal professors on campus, and it's very specific, and they call it out a lot of times, but this is where we first see the poppies on his desk. On Dr. Dillamond's chalkboard, there's also information on agriculture, animals, and Oz and their history.
Yeah, on the chalkboard you can see references to Ozma, Ozma the mendacious, Ozma the warrior, Ozma the librarian, Ozma the scarcely beloved. So Princess Ozma is a character from L. Frank Baum's second Oz book, The Marvelous Land of Oz from 1904, and every book thereafter. She is the rightful ruler of Oz, but she was given by the wizard to the witch Mombi of the North. So I guess this person could never ascend to the throne. But later, L. Frank Baum indicated that Ozma was kind of an immortal fairy, and that she would later return to the throne and rule Oz forever, abolishing its use of currency, which is important because many historical and economical interpretations of L. Frank Baum's work is that he was a populist who hated greenback currency because the feds would inflate it to screw over farmers, and he preferred the silver standard, which is why he made the precious slippers silver.
Oh my God.
But the fact that Dr. Dillamond would even be lecturing about Ozma's reign is probably extremely frowned upon by the wizard's propaganda, as the wizard is really presenting himself as like a great liberator, a modernizer. The talking animals of Oz come from the magical time of Ozma, and the animals remember. And the way I'm pronouncing animals this way is in Gregory Maguire's book, there's a big social difference between capital A animals and lowercase a animals. It's kind of hard to show in a medium that aren't words people are reading. But we also see the Great Drought. Now, the Great Drought is part of the history both to Gregory Maguire's novel and the stage show. It's a natural disaster exploited by the wizard to gain his power. It's rooted really in the Great Plains droughts that were a part of L. Frank Baum's contemporary backdrop as he was writing these books, and inspired the sepia color tone of the Kansas scenes in Victor Fleming's film, as Kansas was coming out of a decade deeply afflicted by the Dust Bowl. It's implied that the deadly desert that surrounds Oz might have been blown here by the other side of that rainbow, and their blight was really our blight.
Damn. But on a happier note, Dr. Dillamond uses little hoofs to turn on the projector, which is composed of many mirrors and uses sunlight. It's a very whimsical world, of course. During this presentation, he details how animals were amongst the only professors once upon a time in Oz, and their history runs very deep. Then he flips his board during the presentation, and on the other side in red paint, someone wrote, "Animals should be seen, not heard. Prejudice, I say!" Also, this is another scene right from the musical, the stage show.
And they should have written it all in all caps.
Yeah.
You could have made your more racist point by just using A and then lowercase.
What if
whatever.
they did the lowercase a, everything else was capitalized? That'd been crazy.
What?
He then dismisses the class and knocks over his poppies, breaking the vase. Elphaba is also the only student who reacts and tries to help him, to which Dillamond tells her, "Poppies keep him cheerful."
But how though?
You addict. We see her working now with Madame Morrible, which we didn't see in the stage show. Morrible's trying to teach her how to harness the power of levitation, using a coin as a point of reference, and she stretches over the sorcery book and her silhouette's creeping eerily, reminiscent of the wings of the flying monkeys. But some have also noted how it's a reference to the old school picture of Margaret Hamilton's Wicked Witch. Morrible then gives her something to really focus on, like Dr. Dillamond, to which the coin goes flying, breaking a glass case. After training, she notices Dr. Dillamond scurrying away and follows him into the night. Through the scariest forest I've ever seen, she finds him meeting with other animals in this little cottage. You can see the scary shoebill stork from earlier, a snow leopard, a piebald deer, an owl, and later an animal that looks like a weasel, but it has a mustache. They're discussing the disappearance of all the animals in Oz. They even reference this map, which actually looks like the same colors of the poppy flower. This shows different areas of Oz with very specific animals that are missing. Herku is a city in Winky Country where Prince Fiyero is actually from. You see Munchkin Country, and Chimneyville is a city featured in Jack Pumpkinhead of Oz within Quadling Country. The lantern Elphaba is also using during this time to look at the map also looks like a hot air balloon. There are many references to hot air balloons because the Oz in Great and Powerful is a narcissist.
Yep.
This leads us into Dr. Dillamond and Elphaba singing something bad.
The best song of the show.
Luckily, it's only like 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's a short one.
It's so quick. In this scene, Elphaba also sees Dr. Dillamond's future locked in a cage, glasses missing. He tells her it's probably better for her to get going so no one sees her, and she goes back down that dark and scary forest road. She then runs into Fiyero, played by Jonathan Bailey, who's a great Fiyero. I love him. He's also talking to his horse at this point.
And the horse talks back.
The horse talks back. The following day, Prince Fiyero is announced to be attending Shiz. It's even in the Shiz Gazette. When this man shows up, it's just so funny. He appears with his horse to women and men gawking, smitten, instantly in love. Me? I'm also in love. Immediately, Galinda takes a book for Ozian law from someone and creeps up to Fiyero. During this scene, he's looking at the map of Shiz, and you can actually find this map on Shiz's website. He slinks around the school board. It's labeled Shiz Biz and Club Societies. There are some great set props from the school on this board, like the tulip fall or whatever Shizness is. During the Shiz University orientation video on YouTube, they give you close-ups of these scenes and the extracurricular activities that you can do, like the Twisted Tornado Tournament. This leads to Dancing Through Life, my song. Mine! Now sung through a rotating library as opposed to the stage version where it's just done out in the courtyard in front of Shiz University. This is absolutely stunning to me and a new perspective on the choreography that I love so much. This is called the Tornado Wheel. It moves in 3 different sections with various groups of dancers. Some are actually parkour street runners, and the entire sequence took over a week to shoot.
Very cool. Very cool. It doesn't feel like a little bit of Grease. You're the one that I want in there. Like
yes.
just a little bit.
All I see is that as entertainment. I can't do that. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. I like that through this dance, Bach and Fiyero aren't immediately like nemesises, or at least like Bach doesn't hate him. They're just kind of friendly.
Yeah, Bach is kind of a crabapple when he gets up in Fiyero's face in the show, but here he's just kind of like, all right, bro, we're kind of after the same thing, bro.
Oh, we're kind of after the same
thing. But it's because Ethan Slater was getting Ariana at night.
He's like, I'm not mad at you because I come home to her at night. Once back at Galinda's and Elphaba's dorm, they're getting ready for the Ozdust Ball, and that's when Fanny and Shin find that old dusty hat. The kids sneak out and head to the grimy Ozdust Ballroom, which is very different from the stage version. They wanted to look like the underbelly of Oz, a place where animals all get to hang out, and there's also an animal band. This is similar to the Ozdust featured in the original novel.
But like in the stage show, this movie omits Gregory Maguire's very, very weird scene in the book where they visit the Philosopher's Club and watch a sex show involving a tiger. It's a lot. And a good cut, if you ask me.
There's some people on that set, they're like, put it in! It was me.
Just get one of the cats from Cats and paint some stripes on him and just let him do his thing.
Get the snow leopard.
We know they got buttholes.
We know they got buttholes. The Ozdust is underground and fish swim above it, and it feels like it's in like an ice cavern. When Fiyero arrives, he strikes an interesting pose. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Elphaba enters the dance in this black gown. The ruffles on her dress purposely portray the underside of mushrooms. Her outfits are interpreted to reflect nature, as the character is marginalized by everyone but animals, so even in those details, they brought it out of the character. Also, correct me if this is just me, I feel like this scene was way worse in the movie than it was for the stage. Like, I didn't feel as bad for her in the stage
you mean like worse as in like, heart-wrenching?
It hurt me.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I mean, part of them slowing down the movie so that it doesn't have the brisk pace of Act 1 of the stage show is like you get to linger on these moments and just empathize and break your heart with these characters and just feel their pain, and God, it's effective.
Oh God, she begins dancing and people laugh, but she continues to dance, and I cried at this scene when Galinda tells Fiyero she does care about what other people think, and thank God Galinda steps in there, joins in, it stops the laughing, and she starts dancing with Elphaba, and this is a moment that Elphaba will remember fondly.
And remember earlier during What Is This Feeling, it was a battle of pink versus green light, where the pink light consistently won during that sequence, but now it's the opposite. The color of the Ozdust Ballroom casts this kind of green light on the dance floor, and Galinda voluntarily enters that green light, turning her pinkness more the color of a steamed artichoke.
Rude. Rude.
I think it's a good thing, though.
It is.
Artichokes are good for you.
But when she said it the first time, it was out of being petty.
Hey, you know the thing about an artichoke, though? It's got a heart.
I'm shook. I'm gobsmacked. Now we get into popular, and Galinda shows off her many stored clothes and accessories, including one pair of ruby red slippers that she clacks together 3 times before giving it to Elphaba. Coincidence? Absolutely
well
not.
Done.
And look at them go.
I like that the choreography does Ariana Grande's own thing, but also pays homage to like Kristen Chenoweth's original choreography, specifically the la 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 la, which is supposed to be a bit chaotic. Rather than her just kind of dancing across the stage, it's an overhead shot where she just kind of like drags herself across the floor above her, forming a rainbow arc, if you think about it. And there's just a lot of little clever winks in the choreography that I just very much enjoy. And specifically, they let Ariana Grande, again, key change to show up, where she goes la 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 la, and it's just like excessive, but also very on brand for Galinda.
Back in their history class, Dr. Dillamond gives the unfortunate news that he's been removed from Shiz, and the new professor waltzes in with an Oz blanket covering a cage with a baby lion in it. Out of frustration and anger, Elphaba slams her bouquet of poppies on the table, and the pollen releases into the air, putting everyone but Fiyero to sleep. In the stage musical, they actually just broke out into dance, and I like the poppies putting everyone to sleep a little bit more.
And if you recall, in the 1939 The Wizard of Oz, the poppy field cast by the Wicked Witch causes Dorothy and the lion to fall asleep, but not the Scarecrow or the Tin Man. But the Tin Man does freeze because he rests from his tears, as I did at the end of this movie. The Scarecrow was the one left alone and conscious, screaming for help. Just keep that in mind.
In a rush, Fiyero grabs the baby lion, and they both escape into the forest on their newfound bikes that they just stole.
And these bikes, the way Elphaba rides her bike, the lion cub peeking out of the basket in the back. Oh, chef's kiss. 100% Miss Gulch with Toto in the basket. The music even samples the Wicked Witch theme. You hear a da 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 da, but it does it more slowly with kind of a noble urgency to it.
In the forest, they take a break to let the little lion cub drink from a nearby pond, and this is where Fiyero and Elphaba have their heart-to-heart, and their love just starts to grow. This leads to Elphaba singing I'm Not That Girl, which Cynthia Erivo will not stop singing at a Target. The following day, a letter mysteriously arrives from Emerald City for Elphaba, invited by the Wizard of Oz. What joy! As you can see, the delivery was sent by hot air balloon because, again, the wizard is a narcissist who can't get enough of reminding you how he got there in the first place.
Yeah, doesn't it feel kind of mean to have like a walrus clapping the cymbals considering what this guy's really doing to animals? And specifically, like, he hasn't thought of to make a monkey do this.
Yeah.
Because he's using monkeys for other things, but he'll get there.
And even in Emerald City, you see only the animals being animals. They're
That's
not talking, it's just birds wandering around, hummingbirds flying around, no animal is speaking. The train then arrives, ready to take Elphaba to Emerald City. This train is actually very real and built for the movie and also weighs 16 tons. It's actually interesting because the train and some other parts of the movie look heavily CGI'd, which could be part of just a post-production situation, but the train simply just doesn't look real to me.
I get that. It's almost in an uncanny valley, but I
Yes.
think that's the idea of it. Like, there are parts of it that are practical. When it moves, I'm sure they use CGI for that. But like, notice that the inside of the train is made up of these cogs and these gears, as are the train tracks that it runs on. So really the whole thing is part of one apparatus, the same machine invented by the wizard to shuttle these prospective proteges from Madame Morrible to his own clutches. So on a meta level, everything we see is part of the wind-up clockwork of the Dragon Time Clock. So I think the reason why it looks kind of artificial is because like they wanted to mask all that practical clockwork,
Okay, got it.
hiding it from us.
Before bidding adieu, Galinda and Elphaba discuss Fiyero acting weird since Dr. Dillamond's leaving, and how in solidarity, Galinda will now start going by Galinda now.
Glinda.
Glinda.
Fiyero is now wearing a poppy on his lapel, and it's so sweet. It's almost like he wants to be enchanted by Elphaba and fall asleep thinking about her. Also, he's an addict.
We need to stop. While the train is about to leave, Elphaba yells to Glinda to come with her, and it doesn't take a whole lot of convincing. Now the two are on their way to Emerald City.
So we talked about how the clocks have 13 hours on it. Right here, in One Short Day in the Emerald City, we see what looks like a 13-hour clock. And I love the Emerald City. It's also just fun to think about. It is a very short day. They spend one short day in the Emerald City because their day is just cut off by the wizard being a big an asshole. It was gonna be like a whole week or a whole semester in the Emerald City, but nope, Elphaba caught on real fast. We see all kinds of fun things, and it feels like Dorothy is being taken on tour through the Emerald City. A lot of the mustaches here resemble the waxed mustache that, you know, they all had in the Emerald City. We see the tall guards that are on stilts. There is an apple cart that I believe may just be apples plucked from those mean trees. They just ripped their apples off. I assume that's where these apples came from. Everything here is a nightmare, really. And one of many cameos we see in the Emerald City. One of the residents of the city is Winnie Holtzman, who wrote the book for the 2004 stage show and is a producer on this film. Now that we're in the Emerald City, this is the first time we see any character in the show wearing green. And I think they've withheld this color from us for so long throughout the film, just so it would hit us as an eye-splosion at this point. Like, it's a very big deal that people are wearing green tinted glasses in the Emerald City, and that's kind of cinematically what Jon Chu is doing to our eyes here. And you'll notice many of these initial costumes, including these men with the long green beards, actually come directly from W.W. Denslow's illustrations for the original Oz books by L. Frank Baum. And we see really cameos galore in this section. So Michael McCrory Rose, one of the Fiyeros during the run of the stage show, leads the vocals of the Emerald City residents, and then we get to Wizomania. And in One Short Day, this is where it kind of slows down and there's a bit of a pause, and then we go, who's the mage? Whose major itinerary is making all us merrier? But before we get to that, they insert this incredible sequence starring our girls, Kristen, Chenoweth, and Idina Menzel, appearing as the wise ones, the superstars of Wizomania, who lead the chorus in an account of Oz's history, the Great Drought, their failure to read the Grimmerie spellbook, but thank God the wizard came with his purported miraculous ability to do so. Of course, Idina cannot help herself when she hits her iconic Defying Gravity belt. Just to make it clear to everyone that it's her. It's the wickedly talented Dorothy.
I was like, oh, she had to hit the note. She had to hit the note.
Also, I love this detail. When the projector shows the wizard reading the Grimmerie, he's not actually reading it. It's just Jeff Goldblum repeating the word Omaha. He's like, Omaha, 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 which is where Oscar Diggs, the con man, comes from.
Many of the costumes in the sequence are very insane. Insane in a good way. I love them so much, you just can't look away. One gang of costumes actually looks similar to these guys, the quadlings from L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. You can also see them on a very specific episode of The Tonight Show, where they performed about 15 some years ago.
I saw that Tonight Show taping.
Did you?
And Gary Busey was on it. And then it was after Gary Busey's segment where he was going crazy, and Jay Leno was like, hey, Gary, kind of looks like this might be one of your hallucinations over here. And he points to the One Short Day cast.
Kind of like inside Gary's head. Please welcome the cast Ozdust the Wicked, ladies and gentlemen.
And as a Wicked fan, I felt so mad. Like, the Wizomania dancers are not hallucinations of Gary Busey. And then to get back at Jay Leno, I pushed him down a hill. Anyway, but there are even more cameos here.
But that's crazy that you remember that show. That's insane.
That's how obsessed with Wicked I was. The guard who shouts, "The wizard will see you now!" A cameo by the original composer and lyricist Stephen Schwartz. This guy loves making cameos in movie musicals. He also showed up in Tick, Tick, Boom with pretty much everyone else important to Broadway.
They enter the palace, and the first thing we see are a ton of monkey guards, and we know that they will be flying soon. Once in the wizard's room, the giant copper head of Jeff Goldblum appears from behind the tendrils.
And it's so cool. This is like very much how it looks like in a stage show. It's like a mechanical head that kind of like jingly moves around.
Yeah, I love that they made it look like Jeff Goldblum. Like
Yeah,
it
it
is
did.
Jeff Goldblum's head.
That's right.
Then we see him, the wizard, played by Jeff Goldblum. And I know I keep going off about their looks, but I love a girl that can turn looks, and Jeff Goldblum's one of them. The trinkets are what I love most about his outfit. They're really hard to see in the costume, but he's covered in these little charms, and one's actually a balloon, and he's a walking symbol of a charlatan, a snake oil salesman. He shows off his little miniature model of Oz highlighting the yellow brick road, which Glenda chooses the color for. Jeff Goldblum starts singing A Sentimental Man while trying to woo Elphaba into staying and working alongside him. That's when Madame Morrible arrives, and what a coincidence.
The shadow puppetry choreography of A Sentimental Man matches the nightmarish shadow puppetry that we saw in Something Bad. Also, it connects to a key visual in the stage show for Act 2 when we see Elphaba's confrontation with Dorothy. Also, we see a moment where the wizard picks up a house and then places it on a spire of the building, the way a tornado will lift the Gale house and bring it to Oz. He also flips the whole thing upside down to turn it into a version of his hot air balloon.
They have Elphaba read the Grimmerie, and in doing so, she gives the monkey chistery wings, painful wings, springing from his back. Now, watching the stage version, I was like, dang, that sucks. Watching a CGI monkey in pain flailing on the ground in this movie was actually really horrible for me. I hated it. I did not like watching it whatsoever.
No, yeah, and did you notice that he has two different color eyes? I thought that was just like a little humanistic detail for this guy.
I didn't like it.
I felt so bad for him.
I know that they can do a lot of things separate from the play, but I was like, oh, I don't like seeing animals get hurt like this.
I love the design of the Grimmerie too. We talked about the comparison to the pop-up book earlier, but the way it is like just it turns into a hexagon and a double hexagon, and in a way it kind of looks like her weird spectacles that she was wearing earlier. That just kind of, if it were like angular.
I see that. Seeing the pain that she caused sets up the rest of the film as we know it. She steals the Grimmerie, and immediately after doing so, Madame Morrible tells the guards, the monkeys, and everyone that there's a wicked witch who stole the Grimmerie. So the flying monkeys are now after her. She runs and finds a hiding space where the wizard keeps his hot air balloon. In a series of very unexpected events, Elphaba and Glenda try riding the balloon to freedom, but are stopped by the closing ceiling. Thus, the hot air balloon pops, almost setting the two girls on fire.
Which, you know, if you know what Margaret Hamilton had to go through the original Wizard of Oz, she suffered major burns on her body while shooting that film. So I just saw an interesting parallelism there.
Even if they didn't intend it to be, it was.
Yeah.
We start entering the beginning of Defying Gravity around this scene, and I love it. I love it.
It was so important for them to do this right, and I think they did. But if you look around this attic, there are all kinds of fun details here. A lot of turn-of-the-century era props that the wizard probably would have brought with him from Omaha in his balloon. There's a cart for peddling potions, like obviously snake oil tonics, other bullshit healing remedies. And you can see a banner for the magnificent Oscar Diggs. Aha! This was the wizard's original name when he was an ordinary con man. This is actually how L. Frank Baum initially conceived him, and Oscar Diggs is the original name of the version of the character played by James Franco in Sam Raimi's 2013 Oz the Great and Powerful. His full name is Oscar Zoroaster Fadrig Isaac Norman Henkel Emmanuel Ambrose Diggs.
Oh my gosh.
I know, right?
Oh my gosh.
Who does he think is Dumbledore? And in this banner, you can see Oscar Diggs taming a lion, pointing to a past as a circus performer and a future as a torturer of cowardly but actually courageous lions.
Elphaba does the levitation spell, which we assume is the same spell she used on the monkeys. This time, she's enchanted the broom that was helping keep the door barricaded.
And we get this moment where Galinda says, I hope you're happy now that you're choosing this. And I actually really love how Jon Chu slowed this moment down, just to let the actors emote their way through this. And when this happens in the stage show, it always comes with Galinda recognizing that Elphaba is trembling, not realizing it's not because she's cold, it's because she's like brimming with rage. And this is when Galinda always finds the iconic cape to dress her in. But the way it's adapted here is a beautiful callback to Popular, because Galinda is dressing her friend, but she first flips through green clothes on the rack and realizes, no, that is the last color to put Elfie in, and instead finds a more striking color, black. this year's Pink. And Jessica and I were talking a lot about this in the break room. The way Defying Gravity was adapted to screen was really the most critical part of this movie's production. If they didn't hit this, the whole thing would have fallen apart. Expectations were sky high. The movements of the song are really just baked into countless theater nerds who belted this show tune constantly throughout our teenage years and college years and adult years. But Jon Chu recognizes that it's actually made up of several dramatic movements that really need breaks in a song to properly reflect. And you can argue, maybe there were too many breaks, but at the end of the day, this song does not need to be a sprint. The sprint that it was when CBS aired it in the 2005 Tony Awards broadcast, where it was just like, you had to fit this into what, 2 minutes, 15 seconds? Come on. But the most important moment in the movie comes when Elphaba leaps through the glass with a broom, because everyone who saw the stage show expected this to be the triumphant, "It's me," and the rise, but it's the opposite. It's a fall. Gravity is still in control, but Elphaba did break the glass, just as she did in she and Galinda's dorm window. She falls, and she sees her younger self in the reflection. And what's interesting about this, we never saw the young Elphaba fall like this, but she did levitate the rest of the world around her from birth. So in a sense, she was always falling. She was always drowning. But like Galinda observed in the Ozdust Ballroom, she just pretended like she wasn't bothered by it. Her past and future selves reach out to comfort each other, and the moment adult Elphaba makes contact, bam! It's the broomstick that she grabs. The power with her grabbing the handle in the earlier shot echoes here. And now Jon Chu repurposes Stephen Schwartz's lyrics with an even more powerful context. "It's me" is Elphaba realizing that the thing she never felt, that she couldn't find a word for in The Wizard and I, was herself. And that catharsis is what fuels "It's me" into a rise. This movie had such a high bar to surprise the fans of the stage show, and Jon Chu totally found a way. Now, Stephen Schwartz wrote the melody of Defying Gravity to kind of match the motion of hovering on a broomstick. You say, "Tell them how I am defying gravity." And Jon Chu mirrors that when Elphaba flies in the loops. And on the high F of defying gravity, Elphaba hits the highest point of her loop and then dips back down. And instead of smash cutting to black on Cynthia's "ah," as her cloak drapes down, looking kind of like the extended fabric that forms the silhouette in the stage show that directed our eyes and sold the illusion that the stage actress was flying, Jon Chu lingers for a few extra moments to clock the reactions of all the players, and then ends with Elphaba zipping past the camera into the sunset. And Jessica, you noticed that what color were the clouds?
The clouds were pink.
The clouds were pink. Isn't that beautiful? Like, both of these women need each other's colors to power them. And she, in this moment, by flying off into the sunset's in the west, she's forging herself as the Wicked Witch of the West.
And that's part one. That's where they close, and then they expect us to get up out of the theater and walk away like nothing happened.
Okay, so now we're moving into the spoilers section. Just some really cool things that get set up in this movie that will get revealed in part 2 of the movie that we just want to acknowledge so that we obviously didn't miss them. But talk about Madame Morrible detail.
Yeah, one big spoiler, or well, not that big of a spoiler. It's very good. If you noticed it, you notice it. Those that get it, get it. Those that don't, don't. We see Madame Morrible put her powers to good use by swatting away the clouds and rain to reveal sunshine. In the musical, part 2 of it, she mentions her magic specialty is weather, and she used her powers to conjure the tornado that brought Dorothy.
And brought the house on Nessa.
Yeah. Also, that scene kind of also talks about like the fact that like she can't be wet.
Yeah, she goes, "We can't get you wet." Yeah. And so happy I could melt. Yeah, we know where that's going, right?
We know what you're trying to do there.
But the big things that we learn in Act 2 that are crazy is that Fiyero, of course, becomes a scarecrow, Bach becomes the Tin Woodsman, and the lion cub that they saved becomes the cowardly lion. Lots of details in this first film set that up. Bach's initial leaned pose is how Jack Haley's Tin Man lean in his dance during "If I Only Had a Heart." Bach's last name is Woodsman, and he's seen reading a book about felling trees. There's also a detail where Galinda tucks in the red handkerchief right where his heart is, and she taps it. Fiyero is often described as brainless. Elphaba tells him to get stuffed, and his dance scene and movement is loose and fluid, meant to mimic the loose joints of a scarecrow. And Jessica pointed out that when he first enters the Ozdust Ballroom, he's doing the scarecrow kind of pose there. Also, like Scarecrow in the 1939 film, Fiyero is the only one not affected by Elphaba's poppy pollen in the classroom. And I will just say, might just be me, the way that little lion cub bares its teeth and gnashes is a bit Bert Lahr-esque. And this one's a bit more obvious, but another big twist from Act 2 of the play. The wizard is obviously Elphaba's father. The stranger with the green elixir, Sentimental Man, layers it on just as thickly as it does in the stage show. Who always longed to be a father. and son or daughter. And parental. Jeff Goldblum has some extra fun with it though. He pulls a coin from behind Elphaba's ear, a cheesy magic trick a dad would do to impress his kid. And Jeff Goldblum is apparently a big fan of like close-up magic and sleight of hand stuff.
Also, it's good for his character. He's a charlatan.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, when he's showing her the version of Oz that he would love, he's basically showing his daughter the dollhouse he made for her. And the sound mixers, I think, just did a pretty good job, or at least as good as they could, auto-tuning Goldblum's singing voice in the earlier scenes so that it kind of sounds vaguely like Jeff Goldblum, but not as obvious.
Throughout the rest of the musical, it said in interviews that is actually Jeff Goldblum doing the full dance and tap and everything. Even though it's just his shadows or we just see his feet, they said that that's him.
Impressive. I mean, whenever you see the stage show, it is always the actor who plays the wizard and the rest of the show. When I saw it, it was Ben Vereen, and I just knew from Ben Vereen's dance moves, I was like, I saw a recording of Pippin. That's totally you, Mr. Vereen. I was like, spoiler.
I saw it.
Also, I love this detail. In their cameo scene, Kristen and Idina foreshadow the big twist at the end of Act 2 where they lower into the trapdoor in the floor in Wizomania, but then they pop back up, just like Elphaba does when she fakes her death by lowering into the floor and then pops back out when Fiyero/Scarecrow knocks on the hatch. Since the opening shot of this movie was that puddle-covered floor, expect part 2 to circle back to that exact shot to show Elphaba still alive, emerging from the floor. And damn, it's gonna feel so good.
We're all gonna love it. And that is our breakdown on Wicked Part 1. Wicked Part 2, you gotta expect in a year, baby. You gotta expect it in a year. I love this movie. Erik, we had a great time when we went and saw it. We didn't sing once.
We didn't sing once,
but I did cry a lot.
Comment down below with what Wicked has meant to your life. Let's keep this comment section wholesome and positive. And I want to hear your stories about the first time you saw the show or what your experience was going to see this movie. Who were you with? Tell us your stories.
Oh, yes. And then follow us at EA Voss and Lulu_Clemons or Lulu Clemons, whichever one you prefer. And subscribe to all 3 channels of the new Rockstars Network for more breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching. Ooh,